The stories I've done that I'm proudest of are stories that if we weren't able to commit our skills and our time to them, might not otherwise have been told. Governments and institutions are actually pretty equipped at obscuring or outright trying to hide the truth from the public. And there are very few watchdogs that have the skills and the resources to really dig for the truth. So it's important at the Post and Courier that we have that mission. Good reporting is expensive. So if you value the kind of public service journalism that the Post and Courier has a record of doing in South Carolina, there's really no better way for you to support that than to pay for a subscription.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Andy Shane, managing editor of the Post and Courier of Columbia, the new newsroom here in Columbia, the capital city of South Carolina. I'm here at our offices at the corner of Hardin and Gervais Streets, not far from Five Points and here in the Waverly neighborhood. And I want to welcome you to the University of South Carolina Leadership Forum, where we will explore the future of South Carolina's largest college in the age of COVID-19. Let me introduce our distinguished panel of guests today who have been gracious enough to join us. Dorn Smith is USC's newly elected board chairman. The Tuberville native has served on the board for a decade. Dr. Smith is a heart surgeon at Williamsburg Regional Hospital. Bob Caslin is USC's president. He arrived in Columbia last year after a 43-year Army career, retiring as a lieutenant general. For 5 years, he was superintendent of the United States Military Academy at West Point. Bill Tate is USC's provost, the school's chief academic officer. The Chicago native arrived at USC last year from Washington University in St. Louis, where he was dean of the graduate school and vice provost for graduate education. Izzy Rushton is USC's student body president. She's the first international student to hold that position. The senior experimental psychology and criminal justice major is from Gold Coast, Australia. And finally, Mark Cooper is USC's faculty senate chair. He has been a professor of film and media studies and English at USC since 2007. He likes to investigate the history of media institutions, including the development of the Hollywood studio system, writing 2 books on the subject. Thank you all for being here tonight. We appreciate it. So let's start by getting your take on how COVID-19 has affected USC's bottom line. What impact has the budget cuts and the furloughs that the school needed to take impacted the school? And will more cuts maybe be needed, considering that the school has estimated that it will lose about $165 million because of COVID-19? Let's go ahead and start with President Caslin.
Yeah, Andy, thanks. It's really great to be with you this evening, and thanks for inviting all of us, and thanks for having us on this panel. We very much appreciate it. When we were looking at what the potential impact was going to be on COVID-19 on the finances of the institution, we went in there initially with about a 10% drop in enrollment. That's pretty much what we were seeing across the nation with other schools, universities. And I give a lot of credit to our Dean of Student Affairs and our admissions office. They really worked it very hard. They worked with the students, and I think they did a great job encouraging students to continue to come back to the university. I was particularly concerned that I thought that the value proposition of higher education based on the experiences from the spring semester was going to have a significant drop in enrollment, not only here, but across the nation. But we were very fortunate to have a good number of our students to come back, pretty much close to what we had previously observed and had. I would say, though, that we did have an increase in in-state enrollment. Of course, when you have in-state enrollment, then your out-of-state enrollment's not there. So the difference in dollar value from out-of-state enrollment and out-of-state tuition with in-state is significant. But every single crisis has an opportunity out there, and this is an opportunity for all of us to take a hard look at where we are financially, where we are and how we do business practices, what our strategies are, what they need to be. So we put together some cost saving measures, and not just the very superficial ones like furloughs and stuff like that you had mentioned. But we are actually doing some really careful studies on to what degree we want to make modifications organizational policy wise, and to see what that's going to look like. So that all that's in the works right now, but I think it's going to produce a much more lean and a more efficient university that will accomplish the mission in better means.
Dorn, let me ask you this. Do you think that there are going to be any more cuts needed in the next fiscal year, the next academic year, to just make up for some things, especially maybe if we have another spike?
That's always possible, Andy. We certainly hope not. And the board has worked very closely with the president, with the provost, with the faculty, with the student body president. And President Castle's put together a great team that everybody's involved. Everybody's looking very carefully at that, very diligently at that. Obviously, we don't want to have to cut any services. We don't have to. But you know, at this stage of the game, as you know, all options are on the table. But we have weathered this storm much better than the projections were initially. So I'm very, very proud of President Castle and his team and the Senate faculty, quite frankly. They pitched in and did the necessary things they needed to do to make the university shine. And Dr. Cooper and his crowd should be applauded for that, quite frankly.
All right. So, seeing how you got mentioned there, Dr. Cooper, what's been the reaction from faculty? What are you seeing trickle down from the decisions that have been made from the Osborne building? What have been made from the boardroom?
Well, I wouldn't use that phrase "trickle down" necessarily. So I think I've been in between 2 and 5 meetings every week with the president and the provost, and Izzy Rushton's been in many of those meetings as well. So I feel like there's been very excellent participation by faculty, not just me, but other faculty leaders in all the decisions we're taking. So wouldn't say trickle down. I would say, you know, faculty at the university are your neighbors. They have school-aged kids, they have elderly parents. They're trying to get through this like everybody else is. We're fortunate. We have pretty rewarding jobs in general, and we get to keep them in these circumstances. Not all of our fellow South Carolinians get to do that. So we're lucky in that respect, and we're trying to move through this the best we can.
And Izzy, again, what are the students seeing as an effect from all of this?
Right. So what students are really seeing is the opportunity to be in person at our university. I think, you know, I look back to August when we first came back, and I felt like in the news, it was constant that every single day a school would turn to online after only being in person after a week. And I remember at that time I was on the Horseshoe and President Caslin and I were greeting freshmen as they were coming through. We had this really cool event outside, a welcome event where we allowed students to meet the president and myself and talk about the future of the semester. And when I tell you that the smiles on their faces said it all, they were so excited to be on campus and so excited to be able to offer that opportunity to meet people and build community that so many of their peers from back home weren't allowed or weren't offered. I've seen a student body that has been resilient through every challenge that's been thrown their way, through wearing masks inside of classrooms, to doing the right thing through social responsibility. I've seen a student body that is persistent and resilient, and I've really been proud of that student body. You really can't pass up student experience. The experience that our university has been able to offer, even through all the COVID mitigation practices and methods, has been second to none. I actually also have the opportunity every single day to walk out of the student union and see the abundance of students sitting outside on our Davis field who are eating Chick-fil-A and other meals. And, you know, that smile that President Caslin and I saw on that very first day, it hasn't dwindled. It's still there. There's still the opportunity for collaboration, for community, for student experience. And I think that, you know, you can't give that up as a college student.
Very good. Thank you. Now, because of what's happened with COVID-19, some students, some parents have asked for some accommodations during the pandemic. Some students have asked for pass-fail grades. Some parents, and in fact, one of the more common questions we got from people who decided to sign up and watch this today was, what about tuition breaks, especially for a lot of the online classes, feeling that maybe that's not quite the same value as what you get as the in-person classes. Bill, we'll start off with you. talk a little bit about the decision that the university's made not to offer a pass-fail option like it did during the spring. Let's go ahead and address that one first.
Right. So it was done in the spring because that was an abrupt change in the middle of the academic year. And it was fair to give the students the option to go that route. We started this semester off with an assumption that whether you were in a face-to-face, hybrid, asynchronistic environment, that the value proposition for all of them was exactly the same. There had been preparation for those classes all summer long. The faculty had invested their intellectual abilities and skills into the classes and thought them through, and they were executed in such a way that students had choice and agency in how they selected those courses. And now they are in them, and it's about them executing their study habits and really taking advantage of the opportunity. None of those classes are any less than any other. I mean, obviously face-to-face is the traditional way we want to go, but the faculty investment is the same. So I don't understand the discount argument at all, not when our faculty have worked so hard to put these together under circumstances that are actually more challenging than the traditional environment where you just, people had to learn new things. So I think that it's just really not fair. And on the pass-fail situation, you have to understand many of the students who are really clamoring about the grades are trying to get in professional schools, medical school, law school, et cetera. It's important that they actually demonstrate a grade. Going a pass-fail option is less robust and makes it extremely difficult for those admissions teams to decide whether or not you've actually persevered through this particular challenge. And so I think that, and we said this to students in writing, that you need to step up and really try to perform well in light of the resources we have. And we provide a lot of out-of-class resources to help students regardless of modality. So I'm hopeful that students will step up and really perform well and show their potential in those grades.
Izzy, let me go ahead and follow up with you real quick. What are you hearing from students about their desires on both of those ends for a tuition break, considering what's happened during the pandemic, and for a pass-fail option?
Yeah, I mean, of course, students are, they have their concerns and they have their complaints. But to go off what the provost was saying, I think that students are still empowered at our university to pursue either graduate school or a job in the real world. And I think that in all the conversations that I've had with students regarding the pass-fail option, they've really, after sitting down, understood the, consequences of moving that way this semester. We are here, number one, to be students at our institution, students first and academics first. And I think that it's in the best interest of our student body. And I think they understand that we don't go that route this semester.
All right, thank you. Well, let me ask you this. I know one of the things that was addressed soon after the outbreak started was having resources on campus, whether that was to offer the online classes, exclusively in the spring, obviously as an option in the fall, as well as PPE and other resources, anything that is needed, considering what we're all referring to as a new normal. Do you feel that there are enough resources on campus to help students, faculty, staff? And if I could give you a little bit more money, is there something more that the university could be doing? Mark, why don't you start us off on that? Just what do you think there's enough resources? And if not, is there something that if money could be, you'd choose?
Go ahead, sorry.
I wanted to get in on the pass-fail thing and just say,
Okay, we'll go back to pass-fail. Go ahead and talk about that.
I'd just be very quick and say to students and parents out there that, when I talk to my faculty colleagues, our grade distributions don't look that much different at midterm this fall as any other fall. So I think students who work in the way Izzy suggested are going to find that their final grades are just fine this time around. The faculty, Dorn mentioned earlier that the faculty agreed to put on pause a merit raise package that would have been the first merit raise package in decades. Well, a decade, let's say that, at least, as long as I've been at the university. And they're hoping that can come back. They're kind of counting on that merit raise package to come back. So that would be my hope for funding.
President Castle, let me go ahead and ask you this. It's, if you kind of could, do you feel like you were able to supply enough resources to help everybody on campus? Or again, considering the money constraints, is there something that if you had a little bit more money, there's something that you might offer?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. No, I think we're in good shape right now. We have the mechanism, we have the funds, and we have the means to be able to order the PPE and the other supplies that we need. We have the workforce that's able to support that. What's changed is that the normal way that you eat your meals, the normal way that you enter into a classroom are changed significantly. I'll tell you one thing that's going to be challenging in the spring is that as we go towards more face-to-face classes and you do social distancing in the classroom, the geometry of the classroom is just going to be limited, and you're going to find yourself in a number of different classes now where you don't have the space anymore to spread everybody out. So if there's one thing that I wish we had more of, it would be more classrooms so that we could actually do social distancing for the increased number of face-to-face classes that we're going to have in the spring.
Well, and that kind of begs, and that actually comes into my next question, but I want to ask you maybe a different way than I planned. And Doran, I'll go ahead and start with you on this. Is I know that there's been some discussion about having to put a halt on some of the capital projects, on some of the building projects, because of the money situation. Do you expect that to loosen up anytime soon? What is it that the board will maybe prioritize moving forward with obviously maybe some of the limitations that may come off from what's going on with the outbreak?
Well, Andy, as you know, everything in life has priorities, and you try to gauge what's most important and what's the important key things. And right now, probably the new medical school, the new medical school complex is probably number one. And hopefully that won't be thrown off the rails or anything. Some of the other projects, some of the dormitories, the South Campus, those sorts of things. I think everybody wants to wait and see what the new normal really is, if you will. I mean, really, we've only been into it for 6 to 9 months, and we have fared better than most institutions, if you will. But by the same token, no one's willing to bet the farm, if you will, that on what the future just holds yet.
But what are the chances of as President Castle was saying, of maybe trying to get some more of those classrooms? I know that there had been some projects that had been talked about that would increase classroom space.
I think that's a very good possibility that will indeed happen, and that as we go back more to in-person classes, as Izzy was talking about earlier, that you're going to have that ability to do that. But by the same token, the most important thing that we do, and the president and the provost and the faculty has done this very well, they protect our young ladies and young gentlemen. And that's our number one priority, not only is to educate them, but we take very sacredly the bond and the trust that parents do. When the Rushtons sent Izzy to us from Australia, they expected us to take care of her. And so that is a priority for us also. And so, yes, we always need more classrooms. One of my friends used to always say, the answer is money. What's the question? And to some degree, that's always true. But right now, we're really holding our own. And again, I applaud President Castlin and the provost and his staff with the job they're doing.
So staying on this just for a moment, where does that new revenue source come from? The plans, I'm sure that you had, back in the fourth quarter of 2019 or the first quarter of 2020, looking very different right now. If this, again, if we kind of stay in this sort of maybe hanging tight for a little while, where are those sources of revenue to do these projects? President Castlin, Doran, if you don't mind addressing that.
Well, first of all, Andy, I mean, some of the COVID expenses are going to be covered through CARES Acts, both with federal and state appropriations, and state money that comes to us through federal appropriations. So we're very pleased to be able to see that coming in. And some of that is, and some of our expenses and some of our refunds that we were previously unable to gain returns on are now going to be able to we can actually apply for them as well. So we have now additional revenue sources through federal and state appropriations to be able to cover some of that. The other projects, the capital projects, are ones that we're working with the legislature on, and it's a discussion I know we're going to have when the General Assembly convenes again in January. And because we had everything lined up in place going into last legislative cycle, and of course COVID interrupted all that. So we're going to go forward working with them on seeing what's possible, feasible. And I think that our chairman, Dr. Smith, laid out our priorities, starting off with medical campus, to have that thing in place. And that's our number one priority on the capital side. And we'll continue to work with the legislature on that.
Well, let me go ahead and ask Izzy and Mark, from, again, the faculty perspective, the student perspective, what is it that you would like to see? Again, I'm going to make you the president and the board chairwoman. Okay, congratulations. Where would you like to see these priorities, placed for the next projects from your standpoints? Mark, why don't you go ahead and go first?
I think I would defer to the board chair, Izzy, on that.
Okay, we'll defer to the board chair. Izzy, you chairwoman, please, you have the floor.
I love that Mark just gave me that question, but that's okay. I can answer it. I think from a student perspective, in terms of priority, our priority is right now and living in the current events of COVID-19. I think that we need to get through this season and get through this student experience and make sure that we can return to whatever that new normal is. I truly don't think our world will ever be back to where it was before COVID-19, but I think there's definitely things that we have to do to ensure the health and safety of our student body, that when we do kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, will even increase our student experience further. So, I'll defer back to Mark, but I definitely think that in terms of a student voice, I think that our priority is the here and now, right through this current era.
Yeah, I would say that we can make some investments in the here and now that serve our longer term priorities. We have needs in infrastructure, research infrastructure, teaching infrastructure, technology infrastructure.
Can you be more specific, just for people who don't know, Mark, if you don't mind, can you be a little more specific?
Sure. So we've already mentioned classroom space, but we need better technology support for teaching in classrooms. That helps us get through COVID-19 and delivering classes that might be simultaneously in person and online. But we don't really have the kind of equipment in all of our classrooms that we might want to do that. This is not a capacity that you can build overnight when every other university in the country is trying to order the same equipment. So take some thoughtful planning, but we could make some investments there that would be in the long-term interests of the university as well as in the short term. The health sciences campus and investments in biomedical research clearly need to be made, both for the strength of our research enterprise and frankly for our service to the state. So that's a reasonable priority. And I think my successor will be working with the provost's office to try and build faculty teams around those kinds of things. So these priorities, the strategic plan places a priority on maybe thinking about being an AAU eligible institution. That requires investments in faculty and graduate students, as well as the infrastructure developments I've just talked about. So yeah, there's no shortage of questions to which money is the answer. And we just have to work together on establishing the priorities that make sense to get to first.
Sounds fair. All right. COVID-19 cases spiked at USC when students returned this fall. But those numbers have fallen off sharply in the past month or so. We're still, but one of the things is we're still seeing large groups of students gather together in 5 Points. I see them actually outside my window when I'm here, heading down in the evening. We have also seen reports about off-campus parties. First of all, I'm kind of curious how the numbers have stayed low, considering what we're seeing, from these events. And is there any hope that maybe COVID-19 will have an impact on student behavior? And so, I guess let's go ahead and we'll start with President Caslin, and Izzy, why don't you follow up after that?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I'm glad you included Izzy because she was hugely instrumental on the great success that 90% of the student body has actually achieved. So, as I talk to students so often, as I see students, 90% of them actually have done a great job. They have taken this seriously and they are doing what they're supposed to. They're following all the ordinances, and I think that's important. The other thing that was part of our strategy was to make sure that we had partnerships with some of the people who had oversight authority over the high risk areas, which were principally social activities off campus. And that's in the 5 points, as you mentioned, and other like neighborhood parties and things like that. I give a lot of credit to the mayor for the ordinance he put in place for the neighborhood parties. I give a lot of credit to the governor for putting the ordinance in place for putting up mandatory masks in public buildings, for stopping alcohol serving at 11 o'clock. And at one point, he had 50% occupancy limits inside restaurants and bars. He since had lifted that to 100%, as you know. And so that has had an impact. But our strategy was really twofold. First, to really encourage students to understand how important this is, how important when they take care of themselves. It's one of the greatest dichotomies, because when you take care of yourself, you take care of the public good at the same time. And they're doing that. I mean, I was really pleased. They're really doing a great job. And then you have the 10% that really want to live a life of a student as they normally had been used to living a life as a student. Large parties, large gatherings, not the social distancing and not the maskings that you would see in accordance with some of the ordinances. And we understand that. So it was important on second to have some type of accountability to make sure that we were able to have accountability for some of those students. And so we looked very carefully. We partnered with the Columbia Police and others that when we did receive the reports of neighborhood parties or some type of activity, our police partnered with them and they went there to either break it up. And if there was a violation of someone in a quarantine, or if there was someone who was hosting one of the parties, then they would be, one of the conditions could have been that they would be held up for suspension or to receive some type of discipline warning. So we've actually had over 60 now students who have been considered for suspension, and we've had as many as 900 warnings that have gone out to students for behavior that was not appropriate. This is the stick, and it's important that we have the stick and to hold them accountability. But I don't want to forget at the same time that you focus on the 10%, the great job that the 90% of the students have been doing. And a lot of that, I give credit to Issy and her cabinet and student government cabinet to make the case to the students peer to peer that you have to take this seriously and you have to be socially responsible.
Before I go to Izzy, let me ask Bill. You're the epidemiologist. Let me ask you my first question, which was we're seeing the case numbers go down a great deal, at the university. What's happening? Especially considering again we're still seeing students congregate like we have.
Right. So the president actually provided you, I think, with a epidemiological response in that the situation is such that a large majority of the students are aligned with our policies and operating appropriately, and you have a small percentage that are outside of the boundary. Some of them, when we see videos, first of all, you don't know if they're a student or not. And just be clear about that. And secondly, there's such a small number. When you think about, we have 34,000 students plus faculty, staff in our almost like town within a town. And so what we're seeing, not just through testing, but through the wastewater situation, that the numbers are so negligible is jaw dropping. And I'm just thankful. I mean, I know that everybody's waiting on the other shoe to fall. But I think while we're in this situation, we should be thankful and continue to positively encourage the students to stay socially distanced and follow the rules so we can make it through Thanksgiving and end this in a successful fashion. You're asking me to determine why some microbe doesn't pass to some other person.
Right.
I don't know. but I can tell you, I'm really happy that in those scenarios, we haven't seen the uptick. We've been checking since some of those videos emerged, and we just have not seen what you might have thought is the worst case scenario. So it's really worked out for us. But a lot of it is that so many students are following what we've asked them to do.
And Izzy, obviously, again, I'm making you representative of 25,000 undergraduates. You have to answer for all of them. But in all honesty, I know you obviously have been part of the public service announcements, the public service campaign to try to make students understand. Do you get a sense? Again, please, I mean, just that for the most part, there's a group that's changing its behavior, a large group that's changing its behavior, or really it's a small group and it's hard to change behavior. I mean, there's an expectation of what you're supposed to be able to do when you go to college, and obviously go to an SEC football game and such.
So the way I see it is that, yes, there's obviously an expectation there of what college is supposed to be like, what university is supposed to be like. I know when I came from Australia, I had this vision of what American college was from TV shows and movies that I had seen. But that is really the main reason why we started so early on I Pledge Columbia. So, I've been a part of this planning group with Mark, Dr. Smith, President Caslin, Provost Tate, right from when this pandemic kind of started back during spring break. And I've really been able to see the work and the decision-making process that has gone into that. So I remember having a conversation with President Caslin probably back in, early May at this point. We were talking about mitigation efforts and what that was going to look like in the fall. And I remember distinctly saying, sir, we're going to have to prep the students for when they come back, because you can't take 32,000 students, put them back on a college campus that they were on before, and tell them, oh, suddenly now things are different. And so we worked right from May to make sure that students were aware that things were going to be different, that they would have to wear a face covering in classrooms, that some classes would be online, that we would be asking them to take themselves and their community. And that's really where I Pledge Columbia was born, and even our partnership with the mayor and the city of Columbia. So I started the I Pledge Columbia campaign, and the main goal behind it was really just to educate students and provide communication surrounding social responsibility. As students, we have a bad rap sometimes of just thinking about ourselves, and I wanted to make sure that students were aware that their behavior and what they were doing when they came back to campus did have a very, very real consequence on the city that surrounds us. We're not a rural campus. We sit right in the heart of South Carolina, and that means that we go to places like Five Points, the Vista, Main Street. And I think it really took a village to make it happen. But when, President Caslin, when the provost says that 90% of students are doing the right thing, I truly believe that. It's easy to see photos on the media and think that the entire student body is out there. But in every conversation that I've had from students, right from May, June, all the way to what are we in almost November, students are becoming and stronger at recognizing their social responsibility and the reason that they're here. And I think I, have been so proud of the behavior change that has occurred. And I truly think that comes from setting the expectation that things would be different right from, May and beyond.
I'll open this up to the floor. I'm going to make you the governor. I'm going to make you the mayor. What's the one rule, one change that you might like to see to help, again, maybe prevent a spreading event, whether it's among students, among faculty? Is there anything that you would like to see or like to see done? As I said, anybody.
I'll start. I told the governor this too. I told him I'd love to see him go back to the 50% occupancy inside bars and restaurants. But he's, in all fairness, though, he's under a lot of pressure for a lot of reasons, economically, for a lot of the small businesses. And he felt that was a good compromise. And he just still kept the 11 o'clock termination of serving alcohol in place. But that's one that I'd love to see back.
Anyone else? All right.
I like the president's answer a lot.
Yeah, very good. All right. So we're already thinking about the spring semester. That's not very far away. Last week, the university announced that it's going to not hold a traditional week-long spring break, but instead have days off sprinkled all through the spring semester. So that's obviously one change that's going to take place. What is the spring semester going to look like? How is it going to be kind of a mimic of what we've seen in the fall? And then really, what do you think the next academic year is going to look like, the 21-22 year? Again, I know that no one has a crystal ball or a magic 8-ball to know quite where this is, going to go with the way the virus is or a vaccine. But again, looking at what the planning that you're doing right now for the spring semester and then really for the next academic year. Bill, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Right. So right now, the spring looks like it's 63% of the classes have some face-to-face interaction. They're either hybrid or all face-to-face. You have to put that with a boundary line. About 1/3 of the faculty have some underlying condition related to COVID. So 66% is our max out. We're about at that in terms of getting the face-to-face kind of engagement. Only 5% of the classes are asynchronistic, which is about where it was this semester. I think that is a new normal. Really, in this context, want to thank the faculty for engaging at that level. I don't think there's much more room to change. Going forward, everyone is waiting on a vaccine. There is some hope with the vaccine potentially to change everything for the fall 2021. If we have a vaccine that has efficacy and is widely distributed, obviously we find ourselves in a situation where we might be able to go back to the traditional face-to-face environment. Although I do think that this whole pandemic has disrupted American higher education, not just the University of South Carolina, but the totality of the enterprise. There are some distinct opportunities to build a hybrid kind of environment that will give us potentially greater access to students across the state and giving them access to really a quality higher education. I did want to say one thing to you, Andy. You asked about the resources that we need. I can't say this enough. You can never have enough need-based financial aid, sir, ever. And so that's a reality that we all have to face, especially in light of the strategic planning process where access and affordability are huge endeavors that we're partaking in right now. So I didn't want to leave out that particular item for you to contemplate.
Doran, let me throw an interesting point. I think Bill raised about the vaccine, the hope that there may be a vaccine in time for the fall 21 academic year. You're a medical professional. You obviously also are the board chairman of an organization where, of course, people are really meant to congregate together and do that. How do you imagine, again, based on what you're seeing, that we might be able to go back to a little bit being more normal, or do you imagine that as Bill was saying, we're going to probably be in this hybrid model for a while, but just because I think we're going to even with a vaccine, we might be cautious for a little while.
I think that COVID is here to stay. I don't think that a vaccine is ever going to eradicate it. Somewhat similar to the influenza vaccine that everybody gets each year. The reality is there are thousands of different strands of the flu that you can be susceptible to, and you only get a limited numbers of those with the flu vaccine. And I anticipate, but I don't know because no one knows yet, that COVID will probably be to some degree the same thing. So I think that if and when the vaccine is available, that it will allow us to move back to a quicker old normal, but I'm not certain you're ever going to see the old normal completely restored. Both Mark and Bill and Izzy were all discussing that, and we are continuing to make a significant investment in the infrastructure of IT and things of that nature. So I think that all this has done, the COVID crisis has expedited what most people the experts have been predicting for years, that you're going to see more and more online education, hybrid education, et cetera, from that standpoint. And it's happened in essentially every other industry in the world. And higher ed has been one of the ones that have for better or for worse, that have been somewhat insulated from that. And COVID has probably lit the fuse, if you will, to start that. Where it will end up, I don't think anybody knows yet, Andy.
Well, okay. Izzy, Mark, from the student perspective, the faculty perspective, are students ready to have more online classes? Is that something they accept? Or going back to, of course, what you've been told to expect is, you go to a class, you meet with a professor, that kind of thing. Because again, in talking to students, some of them don't mind online classes. Some students I've talked to really don't like them, and the idea of having more of them is not something they're doing. But of course, we might be in a transition. So Izzy, why don't you go first? Talk a little bit about how you think students would take to the idea that they're going to have more online classes on a more permanent basis.
I think to your point, it depends on the student you ask. I think there's definitely not a blanket view on online versus in person. There's pros and cons to both. And I think that in this lifetime, every student has a different scenario. And for some, online works best. Personally, I'm taking all online classes this semester, and that is out of choice. And I thought that that was going to be best for my schedule and my lifestyle. And it really has been effective and efficient in my life. One of my roommates, all in person classes, and that works for her. She loves the connection with the professor in person, with being in class and connecting and talking to others. And that's what works best for her. So really my household is a prime example that it depends on the student, it depends on their lifestyle, and it depends on what works best for them. I think that we are going to see a change in the future, that students are going to look for more online classes than maybe what was previously seen as a normal college experience. I truly think that adds to the pros of access and affordability for students. And I think that it will really help our institution to draw more students in with different backgrounds and different situations. But with that, I can hand it over to Mark.
I agree with my colleagues here. There'd be more variety in course delivery modes as we engage different students with different needs and different interests. I'm really enjoying my hybrid class. I wish I could see the students' faces when they're in person. The masks are drag. Be happy to have those gone. But it's a pretty effective way to deliver a class. You can have both online delivery of lecture type materials and then substantive discussion in class. So I'll probably continue to play with that in my classes. I do think we have learned that students greatly prize the residential college experience, and that for a lot of students, they really want, even if online classes are part of it, they really want the football games, the sense of community with other students, opportunity to participate in student organizations, discover themselves as adults that aren't living at home. Not every student is this way, but there's still a great deal of demand for that residential undergraduate experience. So I don't think that's going away. I think we'll find that online and hybrid classes are a bigger component as we try to tailor our course offerings for different populations of students with different needs and interests. But the residential college will be with us.
Andy, can I jump in and make a comment?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, just taking off of what Mark said, I do want to give our faculty a huge applause, because what we made our faculty do last spring in a matter of just a couple of weeks to totally make a 100% transition from residence to a modality of online, and for them to be able to produce education to that level was amazing. And even what they're doing right now, Mark won't brag about himself, I'll brag about him. He has actually produced one of the most innovative ways of delivering education. He talked about it as a hybrid. He just ran out of space. So what he does is give the lecture online, and then he brings half of his class in on one day and half of the class in person on the other day. So it's that type of innovation that our faculty are really ought to be applauded for. But the big issue here is, where is higher education going, and how can we as an institution adapt to it? And the first thing you have to recognize that higher education is changing, and I think this pandemic has catapulted us into the future. And the future is really, because you probably heard from everybody's testimony, that students want education delivered in different modalities. Some like it online, some like it online synchronous, some like it online asynchronous, some like it in person, some like it online, but they still like the resident environment for football games and things like that. So we as an institution have got to find the ways to deliver education anytime, anywhere, and be able to be proficient in each one of those modalities based on where the demands and the needs are in the future. And I'll tell you, on top of that, let me give credit to our staff. We have to, every single one of our students, no matter where they are in the world, has to have the ability to synchronize in and out of every single one of our 650 classrooms. And thanks to our Department of IT, during the pandemic, they actually wired and were enabled each and every single one of those 650 classrooms to be able to be IT connected. So this is a staff in the pressure in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of a crisis, rising to the occasion and doing some great work.
Thank you. I was wondering, and this is a question for each of you, and what lessons are you taking away from the outbreak, and and besides the online classes, we just spent time talking about that, so let's take that off the table. Besides the online classes, what do you think will be different moving forward It's sort of for each of the state, the constituencies you represent or you work with. Doran, we'll go ahead and start with you. What lessons do you take away? What's going to be different?
I think that if you look, that there will be there's always been a discussion regarding the haves and the have-nots in colleges and universities in the country. And unfortunately, I think there will be a exodus, if you will, of some of the smaller schools that were less competitive, if you will. And that I think that the have schools, if you will be the ones that get bigger and stronger, if you will also. But you also fret about will there be a fundamental shift away from college, if you will, to technical colleges or things like that as well. I think that the needs of our state in particular, and healthcare and computers and engineering, hospitality and retail, business, I think that demand will always be there, and a quality education will draw people to our flagship university, Andy.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. How do you compete with if people sit and say, look, I can get something at a 2-year college, I can get that certificate or that associate degree that will be good enough to do X, and get it for obviously less money. I don't have to move away from home. Maybe there's some people who don't care about that residency, that issue. How do you compete? Is there a way to compete with that moving forward?
Of course, absolutely. And what you're really dealing almost with two different subsets of students, if you will. Some that want to be in the non-professional track that can get a 2-year degree to do that. But if you want to be a nurse practitioner, a PA, if you want to be an engineer, an architect, if you want to be the CEO of JP Morgan or something like that, then you're not going to be able to have a 2-year degree to do that. And so we all know that college is not right for everybody, but for the people that it is right for, you have an obligation to make them be able to have the best education that you can get for their bang for their bucks, if you will.
Sure. Bill, I'll go to you next. What lessons are you taking away from the outbreak, and what do you think will be different moving forward outside of the online?
Well, I'm going to follow up on two of the remarks that have already been made. Number one, sure. I think during the pandemic, you come to understand the importance of the University of South Carolina. If nothing else, people in this state ought to understand that we put the flag up and we really flagshipped. In the midst of a pandemic, it was absolutely a wowing performance. And I think that should never be lost to the people of this state. Number two, I'd also like to highlight the engagement piece. What we take away from this, 31% of our students do undergraduate research, 30% do study abroad, 20+% do undergraduate theses. This is an engagement with faculty in very special ways. And when you think about this, we're probably going to keep those numbers up during this pandemic. In other words, our students are still going to be getting that individual engaged experience. And in the end, that's why we matter. Because
But let me ask you this: you get an individual engaged experience with 35,000 students on campus. I mean, again, I know that I'm just wondering if maybe not all the students would agree with you about that, considering the size of the university.
Well, we're in the top 25 in the United States of America in terms of students who do undergraduate research. We're in the top 40, or really the top 40 for students who get PhDs. That's another engaged one-on-one environment. What I'm saying is that's not going away, sir. We're absolutely getting it done, and we're still getting it done during the middle of this pandemic. People are still doing undergraduate research. That didn't stop. We put that infrastructure in the summer. Folks were working in laboratories and working with faculty members. That is very special. You can talk about technical colleges and the like. I have great respect for them, but you can't do this at a technical college. What we're providing is a value added over and above what you can get at some of the other places. And that's just special. I know residential experiences are special, and Izzy laid that out. But what's really special, I'm the provost, what's really special is when you can engage with a faculty member who is passionate about their subject, and you can learn from them in that kind of one-on-one environment. That's happening at a flagship school with 30,000+ students. That's special. That means faculty like Mark Cooper are working really hard to make it happen in elite ways. You just can't get that everywhere, sir. It's just not out there like that. So it's 50 flagship schools. We're one of them. And this is unique and distinct. And that's what I take from the pandemic. And it has to stay. We need this for South Carolina to be great. We need us. The university has to be great for this state to be great. And it's that one-to-one is right there.
Mark, your name came up. Why don't you go next? What lesson are you taking away? What do you think will be different moving forward and beyond?
Yeah, I love it when the provost talks about flagshipping. I get kind of goosebumpy. And I'm meeting with an honors thesis student on Friday. I'm going to make sure he gets the recording beforehand to get pumped up because he's a little behind on his thesis.
So the football team is not the only one with a hype video. I get it. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I want to talk about something else, though. Our president turns out to have an absolutely infectious passion for cross-cutting, horizontal leadership structures that plan deliberately and implement things very deliberately. And that positions our university to take on some grand challenges that require collaboration across its various parts. And that's going to stay, I think. I think after the COVID-19 stops spreading, this passion I think our president has for this kind of leadership will continue. And that's going to make a big difference in our ability to flagship in the way the provost says. So I hope that stays.
Well, let me ask you this. What is it you've been able to do, or what is it you think you can be able to accomplish because of this change in the way the president and the folks in the Osborne building have changed this relationship with faculty?
Yeah, so I won't get too in the weeds there, but we've already talked about the pandemic response. So just think of the number of researchers in all different kinds of areas involved in that effort, not just our public health folks and our basic science folks and our pharmacy folks, but people who are expert in communications and people like me who just happen to have gotten elected to something and try to learn really fast. And, we had people from all different parts of the university, faculty, embedded on a lot of teams working on a lot of these issues. And that made the whole effort stronger, more agile, more responsive. Not that we made everybody happy all the time, but it made it a more effective effort. And if you could apply that to the way we think about biomedical research in general across the university and all its aspects, including things like ethics and the humanities and the social sciences. And if you could apply that to how we think about artificial intelligence. Already we have, wonderful cross-cutting teams working on those issues. If you apply that, how we think about need-based aid, which is a complex, it's a political problem in our state, it's an economic problem in our state. It's a big problem. So you start imagining a university that can really get its act together across its many different areas and apply its collective intelligence to some of these problems. Then you have something that can really change the picture. And that would be my hope for the university.
Izzy, to you, what lessons are you taking away from this? What do you think will be different about USC moving forward?
Definitely. Thank you. So I think one thing, to kind of go off what everyone was saying, really, one thing that I have learned about this university, and I get this from President Caslin, is to always have a commitment to excellence. I think early on, once, we'd worked with the health team and epidemiologists and determined that we would be able to come back in the fall and keep our student body safe, we made a commitment to keeping that student experience there for all our students, keeping the experience there for faculty and for the entire Gamecock community. I think that, despite that things are different and mitigation methods are there, students still have the same access to all the same resources they had before. I would honestly argue even more access. And I think that's something that we will see continue through the future. So, a couple of weeks ago, I had a telehealth counseling session online that maybe in previous years I wouldn't have been able to use. I'm able to, get my resume read online that in previous years that wouldn't have worked. And so we are seeing this year students access access to all different resources that previously wasn't there. You know, you can still go to the Student Success Center, you can still use the Career Center, you can still go to the Health Center. And I think that is something that we determined early on would continue. And I think that we will see even more access move forward in the future.
Well, let me ask you this. What is the one service or the one thing that maybe students took for granted or didn't want to use, but all of a sudden, yeah, I got to use this?
Definitely something that people took for granted was the Thomas Cooper Library. I know that sounds silly, but it's so true when you have, 7 floors and then suddenly we have COVID and it's not so easy to use. At our university, Thomas Cooper Library is a great place for community. I met some of my roommates there freshman year, and I think that has definitely been a resource for students that, we have to be careful and we have to put mitigation methods in place so there's not as many seats. And so it's definitely not, the Health Center or the Career Center, but that is a real hub for students and something that they definitely took for granted in the past. And I know they'll look forward to getting back to full capacity sometime in the future, whenever that is.
And President Caslin, finally to you, what lessons are you taking away from the outbreak, and how do you think the universities will be different moving forward in future years?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andy. I appreciate it. I think, if you look at any particular crisis, one of the first things that erode in a crisis between an institution and its constituents is trust. And trust really is a function of communication and transparency. And it just makes the case on how important it is to maintain communications to all constituents in so many different manners and ways, and to be as transparent in ways that you heard Mark Cooper and others talk about. And on top of that, it's just not the trust between an institution and its constituent. In our case, being intimately integrated into the community, it's an issue of trust, an issue of public trust, the trust that we have with the community, the trust we have with the citizens of South Carolina. And when that picture was on the front page with our 2,000 students that were at Orchards, the Orchard housing area, and I got some emails and I got a couple letters from concerned constituents that were out there, citizens, and it really makes the case that we have an inherent responsibility to have a relationship with the community of which we're a part of. And we have an inherent responsibility to have a relationship that's built on trust. And it's very important that each and every one of us that are involved in a public institution understand how important that relationship is and how important our behavior is in building that relationship. So trust in a crisis is one of the best important lessons that I think that are critically important, and communication and transparency is one of the ways to keep that trust. I think if we're going to be different in the future, this is certainly catapulting us into new areas, and that's what a crisis is, because within every crisis there are going to be opportunities that are out there. I'm very pleased with the team's effort to put together a strategic plan in the midst of a pandemic, a strategic plan that has a vision and a mission statement with 8 strategic priorities, and then to develop programs to accomplish them and then to resource them. A strategic plan in a pandemic in the middle of a crisis is so tremendously important, because you can be so engulfed with the flames of the crisis that are burning at your feet that you fail to see what's going on in the horizon and what's going on strategically and the changes that are being made and the opportunities that present themselves. And if you fail to look out in that particular area, somebody else will, and they're going to take advantage of it. So it's so important that you must keep your eyes on the strategic horizon out there in the midst of a crisis. And so I'm very pleased with the team to be able to do that and to deliver to the board a strategic plan of which the board approved. I'm very pleased with that. But I think we will be known most for being a flagship that served the state of South Carolina and the people of South Carolina. Our epidemiologists that were doing such great scientific work, our Arnold School of Public Health that produced the wastewater treatment capability, the pharmacy school that produced the saliva test, that the state just wants to now deliver that across the entire state, other institutions across the state. And it's our duty as a flagship university to be able to serve the people of South Carolina in whatever capacity and way that we can. And I think that's probably what we're going to be known of mostly.
Bob, let me ask you a real quick follow-up question. In the first part of your answer, you talked about building that trust in the community, such as what happened, at the Orchard. Okay, obviously, the university has staff, faculty, and administration that, sort of sees things one way. Then you have thousands of students who are 18, 19, 20, 21, et cetera. How do you get them to buy into this trust, buy into this idea that especially considering that 80% of the students live off campus, that they do the right things to represent the university, to represent themselves?
Yeah, you know, as concerning it was to me as the president when I saw the picture and understood what was happening, I also saw it as a teachable moment. And I said, we got to get a letter out. We got to communicate to the students, not in such a way that it condemned and turned them off, but in such a way that they understand as members of a community, as members of a public institution, that we have a relationship with our community. And it's so tremendously important for us, not just to understand the medical spread that can occur, but just how they're viewed by their constituents in the community and how the community views the institution of which they're a part of, and how we can serve that institution. You can build lots of trust, but it'll just take one event that will put a chink in that trust in a significant way. And I thought it was just a teachable moment to talk to the students. So I sent them out a letter. I'm not sure you had a chance to see it, but I sent a letter out to all the students and got some pretty good feedback, you know, but again, you know, you don't forget, 90% of our students are doing great. They understand it and they're responsible. And it's just a matter of corralling the rest of them and get them in that direction. And we'll get there. And they're making great progress.
Very good. President Caslin, thank you. And speaking of corralling all of you for an hour on a Tuesday night, I really appreciate it that you all came out and joined us tonight and joined our audience tonight to help educate them, enlighten them a lot about USC, which is such an important institution in this state and in the city of Columbia. You know, this concludes our University of South Carolina Leadership Forum presented by the Post and Courier Columbia. You know, I hope you found this informative. I hope you found this insightful. I hope you found this, in a way, maybe even entertaining. You know, we're planning on doing more events like this with newsmakers, decision makers around town, around the state. I want to say thank you to our panel: Izzy Rushton, Mark Cooper, Bill Tate, Doran Smith, Bob Caslin. I want you, if you can, for those of you who are still watching, please check us out at postandcourier.com/Columbia for the latest news from around the capital city. Also there, you can sign up for our weekly newsletters that we have. We have 3 at the moment. We're going to have a 4th pretty soon. And to subscribe to the newspaper, which is the best way you can support quality journalism across the state. The Post and Courier is the largest, the oldest, the most decorated newspaper in South Carolina. So we again appreciate the support that we get. I want to say again, thank you to the panel, and to you, good night.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Andy.
Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not coming in to write some sensational story. You know, we are trying to report the news first, fairly, and accurately. There's the old journalism mantra that it's important that as journalists we comfort the afflicted and that we afflict the comfortable. And that's really a lot of what we do. We try to bring, you know, a voice to the voiceless in our communities, and we try to also hold powerful people accountable for the decisions they make and how those affect others. I think people should subscribe and support journalism with real dollars, because we can't do all this for free. You know, I have to eat, I have to pay rent. We do real work. Our work has a tangible, significant value to your community